is Jeb Blount, CEO of Sales Gravy, and I'm the author of Fanatical Prospecting and my brand new book, Sales EQ. And I've got Art Sobczak with me. He is the author of one of my absolute favorite books called Smart Calling. Today, what we're going to talk about is picking up the telephone, reaching out, and engaging prospects. And Art's got some great information that he's going to provide us and some great techniques he's going to talk about. Art, welcome. Could you do me a favor and tell us a little bit more about you than what I just gave them?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you, Jeb. It is an honor and a pleasure to be speaking with you and your audience. I'm a big fan of your material and have been for a long, long time. And a little bit more about me. Well, I had my first sales job when I was 13, selling tickets to the Policeman's Fundraiser Circus in downtown Omaha, which in retrospect, it was probably a scam because I don't even think there was a circus. But I learned at a very early age that I could sit in an office on a telephone and talk to people and make money. And it seems like most of my jobs after that, through high school and college and then in my corporate life, involved sales and using the phone. And then I decided after I was in corporate life for actually a short period of time that I wanted to do that on my own. So I've made it my life's work since then to work with professional salespeople. I say professional, I mean people that take it seriously, right? And work with them on the what to say, how to say it, and the processes involved in order to have more success using the phone in their prospecting and their sales as well.
Salespeople these days seem to be really afraid of the phone, but I'll be honest with you, salespeople 20 years ago were afraid of the phone. Why does the phone matter so much in sales?
Well, let's look at different forms of communication. The most effective form of communication is face-to-face. The second most effective form of communication is using the phone. And the thing about face-to-face communication is that it's also the most costly. So we know, and I know you work with a lot of outside salespeople, I don't know what the figures are today, but a few years ago, it was estimated that a face-to-face sales call was in the, $300 to $500 range as far as what the costs were. And the thing is so many people will show up for a sales visit and they are talking to somebody who may not be qualified. It took them a ton of time to get there, and they can only make maybe 3 or 4 of those calls during the course of a day. And I know in your organization, you have an inside sales team, and your people are placing how many phone calls per day? Or how many people are they talking to?
120. They don't talk to 120, but they make about $120 a day.
So the math works on that. And also, we had talked a little bit about this previously, that there are a lot of people out there that will say cold calling is dead and we should be using social media and blogging and all of these other tools in order to create demand and inbound marketing. Well, the fact is that picking up the phone is the fastest and cheapest way to initiate a sales conversation and get somebody in your pipeline. That is the most effective way, the fastest and the cheapest and the easiest way to do that. So that's why the phone still matters. It mattered 20, 30, 33 years ago when I got into business. People called it telemarketing at the time. Of course, that's a bad word today. Today, people who are using the phone strictly in sales, or where they call it inside sales, but essentially it's the same thing. And it's easier today to do it because of all the information that is at our fingertips. So it's always mattered, and I would say it matters more today than ever. And the thing is that there are fewer people who are actually doing it. As you and I both know, common mantra among people is that, well, nobody is picking up the phone anymore. I mean, nobody's answering the phone. Well, we know that is false. And I would maintain that more people actually are picking up the phone today. But there are a lot of people that aren't picking it up on the sales side because they believe a lot of the garbage that they're reading and hearing out there, or they're just simply afraid to do it.
Well, clearly nobody picks up a phone that doesn't ring, and you're exactly right. Let's loop back on a couple of things that you said there. So one of the things is the phone is more efficient. So even with field salespeople, I teach a lot of field salespeople that are out knocking on doors. They say, well, I don't want to use the phone because I'm better face to face. And what I say is, Yes, you are. And that's why you have a job. Clearly, being face-to-face with a prospect is the most impactful way that you can have a conversation. But if you're spending and wasting that $300 to $500 having conversations with prospects that aren't qualified, you're wasting a lot of money. And what I say to salespeople is this. I ask them a simple question. How many doors can you knock on if you go out and do in-person prospecting a day? And they'll say, well, 20. I say, okay, well, if you're in Atlanta and it's July, how many? Well, 10. Just can I make in 30 minutes? And I'm pretty fast. I can dial about 30 phone calls in about 30 minutes. Now, if I'm talking to a lot of people, it'll take a little bit longer, but I can touch way more people in a shorter amount of time on the telephone than you can. So whether you're a pure inside sales rep or you are an outside salesperson, the phone is the most efficient way to engage prospects of every tool. And I'm with you. It's just the most powerful tool for salespeople in their toolbox. And it was 30 years ago, and it is today. The other thing that you said is that this misnomer that people don't pick up the phone anymore, which is complete bullshit. And I said the word on air. I said it. It is bullshit. That is a myth that people are making up. One of my reps came to me and said, Jeb, nobody picks up the phone anymore. I said, how many people have picked up the phone? We get about a 25% pickup rate. He said, about 25%. I said, go back there. I keep numbers from back in the 90s. Go into my credenza. Pull any of those books out of there. I keep every single number that I've ever done. I'm obsessive about it. And said, tell me how many people were picking up the phone. In 1995, about 25%. And in fact, in our B2B clients, we're seeing about a 30% pickup rate. We're seeing about 5% increases. And we believe it's because, A, what you said, nobody's calling. So nobody's picking the phone up at all. And B, because that the phone is attached to a human being. We're carrying our phones around with us everywhere we go. This is my business phone, and it's everywhere I go. So because you stand out when you call, and because you can, the phones are with people, they pick the phone up. And I do prospecting blocks with different companies I work with every day, and our pickup rates are consistently 25 to 30% in the B2B space. I know that there are some industries where it goes down to 10%, but I've got some clients where it's around 80%. And I just think it's a complete myth and it's complete BS.
It amazes me where you just go on LinkedIn and you can do a search on cold calling is dead, or do a Google search. And there are so many people who claim that. And it's to me like saying, well, the sun doesn't come up in the east. No, it doesn't do that. All you have to do is just look at the people that are having success doing it every single day.
I love Chris Beals from Connect to Sell had a sign up with a bunch of his salespeople, and he had their call stats on it. And he said, the sign said, if cold calling is dead, did zombies make these calls? And I saw another stat that said that 92% of cold calls fail. And this was from a social selling guru who was basically saying, all cold calls fail. This, by the way, is also a social selling guru whose own business failed because he didn't make any calls. So, there's a lot of credibility in this statement. But, one person, and it was a really smart sales rep, said, well, that means that 8% of the time I'm succeeding. And if I make 100 dials and I get 8 appointments, I'm at the top of my game. I'm selling more than anybody else in my company. So it's all about perspective. And by the way, 92% of cold calls don't fail, because if I call you up and I find out that your buying window is next year, no, I didn't set an appointment. No, I didn't sell anything, but I know when to call you now, which means my database got better and I succeeded. So I think that there's a lot of work that we need to do, especially with the crowd that's out there selling this lie about how LinkedIn's going to solve all your problems. I'm not saying LinkedIn's a bad thing, but I think it goes into what you said, which is that selling and the phone is easier than ever before because of tools like LinkedIn. So I've got 2 questions for you, and I'm going to give you both of them. These are kind of layups for you, Art. A, why does the word cold calling create so much emotion? Like it's like the BuzzFeed of LinkedIn. All I got to do is post something about cold calling, and my post is going to get viewed 200,000 times. Why does it create so much emotion? And then you coined the term smart call, and tell me how you re-engineered a cold call. I call cold calling interrupting, like you got to interrupt people. But how did you re-engineer that to make people more successful when they do pick up the phone and they do get a prospect on the line, and getting a conversion, whatever that may be, going into a sales conversation, setting an appointment, or gathering information?
Okay, let me address the first one first, and then I'll get to the second one, because that's going to be a much longer answer. So why does cold calling stir up so much emotion? Well, two things. One is, I think you have the people out there who have a vested interest in selling their social selling platforms, such as the individual who I'm pretty sure that I think you were referring to there. And I would just shake my head every time, because I would get his emails every day and he'd have just all this garbage. And obviously he was a pretty good copywriter, but he was preying on the fears of people who are afraid to interrupt someone and to meet someone and talk to someone that they've never spoken with before. And that is a huge fear. So I think you have one camp of people who are of the social selling, inbound marketing mindset, and I also might put them in the wuss mindset of they're just simply afraid to do it, and therefore they think that this is the new way. And you know, in sales, you've been around a long time as well. There's a new shiny object that comes around every couple years or so. Right now you got the term social selling, which frankly I'm not even quite sure what that is. I mean, I think all selling should be social, isn't it? Right? So I'm not quite sure what that is. And I agree, we should be using all of these other tools. I use them myself, LinkedIn and blogging and content and all that, but it's never they're all complements to talking to people. I do a presentation that I call People 1.0. Instead of Sales 3.0, it's like, let's get back to actually talking to people. And I think the other reason that it stirs so much emotion is simply because of the fear of simply doing it. And then something else too is, let's face it, there are a lot of people who are doing it in a horrible way. I mean, they will call up, they won't have anything in it for the person that they're calling. And I collect these. People send them to me. I have a recorder hooked up to my phone, so I take great joy in getting these calls. And I learn things from the excellent callers. But sadly, there's more and more people who will just simply call up and they'll trip all over themselves, and they won't have anything of potential value for the person that they're calling. And then they're going to get the resistance as a result. They're going to get blown off of the phone. So human nature is if we get kicked in the teeth often enough, we're going to stop getting in the way of the foot, right? So all those things contribute to, I think, the emotions surrounding cold calling, and just the nature of the word itself. And this will get into the answer to the second question here. I believe there's so much there's so many negative terms associated with sales in general, but then also prospecting. I mean, just the word cold calling, I mean, to me, that is negative. I mean, cold being, I'm calling, and here's my definition of a cold call, by the way: calling somebody that we don't know, who doesn't know us, who wasn't expecting our call, and I have a negative definition of it, and then giving somebody a pitch about something that they don't want or they don't need. So I coined the term smart calling, which is very simply knowing something about the person, the organization, and anything that's going on in their world or their company's world that might make them a better prospect for us and enable us to say something that is going to be relevant to them, capture their attention, and give them a reason to stay on the phone with us for the next 5 seconds, which is going to give us the next 10 seconds, which will give us the next 15 seconds, or whatever our objective is for the call. Obviously, an appointment call is going to be shorter than a true inside sales call. And by the way, one of my feelings is still playing on a phone call, stay on the dance floor. Too many people say that get off the call as soon as possible. You don't want to sell. Well, and I said this 33 years ago when I got into business, and I'll say the same thing today. Virtually everything is being sold over the phone. And people that say, well, it can't be sold on the phone, all you need to do is just go find somebody that's doing it. And I could do that pretty quickly for whatever it is that somebody says can't be sold.
A lot of the questions I get from sales reps are, how do I warm up a cold call? What I'm hearing is, how do I make the call easier? the call's not going to be easier. You said, I want to make the call more relevant. When you're interrupting someone, and let me explain, this is what I mean about, when I explain cold calling, I don't think anybody really understands what a cold call is. I thought your definition was fantastic. That when you call someone, if they're a referral, if you met them at a trade show, if you know everything in the world about them, you're still interrupting their day. And when you get your day interrupted, you're not happy about it, and neither are they. I mean, nobody's happy about it. So you have a choice to make. You can interrupt people, or you can starve to death. But if you're going to interrupt people, do it smartly. Do it the way Art said. Make it relevant to them and make it something that they can, that giving them a reason to meet with you. I use a because statement in my system. You have a different type of process in Smart Calling, which is a fantastic book, and I subscribe to it. But you've got to have something relevant. You got to give them a reason to meet with you. And again, I talk a lot about appointment setting. You're talking a lot about moving people into the process. But warming up the call, it's so inane. And I'll give you an example of a client that we weaned off of this concept. It was a software as a service client, inside sales team. And what they were calling for, their calls were to set an appointment to do a demo. So that was the purpose of their call. And they had these lists of prospects. They were businesses, and they could pretty much work with any business that had Salesforce. And they were sending a series of 8 emails to the prospects before they would pick up the phone and call them. And they weren't getting very good results. And in fact, sometimes they were getting really bad results because the person who got 8 emails was really pissed off by the time they picked up the phone and called them. But they were trying to warm it up so it would be easier for them. And what we changed was, you have a relevant message. You have a great software product. So why don't we take the list and call it first? We'll leave voicemail messages for the people that don't answer the telephone, and the people that do answer the telephone, will convert them into demos. And it turned out, by just dialing the list first, a certain number of people answered the phone, and most of those people were willing to do a demo when they had something relevant, smart, to say that engaged them and brought them in. And then we put together an email and a voicemail and a social campaign behind that for the prospects that we didn't get a hold of, to create familiarity, to bring them in using different, value props in order to connect with them in a relevant way. And that's, I think, that the thing that's missing in a lot of training is, and a lot of the pandering that goes on is, social's going to warm it up, or this is going to make it more familiar. It's not. You're still interrupting someone. So if you're going to interrupt them, do what Art says. Be smart. And now in Smart Calling, one of the things that you do that I think is brilliant is that you walk reps through standing in their prospect's shoes and thinking about all of the things that might be relevant to them. And I believe that you call it possible value propositions, but it's really a neat thing to do, because it forces you to start thinking from their perspective versus your perspective. And like you said, the calls that I find that are completely turnoffs when somebody calls me is the one that's all about them and not about me. So walk us through a little this process, maybe teach us this process for standing in your prospect shoes and changing the way you think about when you call them.
Sure. I call it the possible value proposition. Other people simply call it value proposition. Some people call it elevator pitch. I've thought long and hard about this. I like to call it possible value proposition, because the thing is this: we cannot tell somebody what is value to them. Value can only be driven out by the person who's receiving it. We can't engineer it in. Now, given that, I can surmise what might be of value to you. And then what I want to do is I want to take the results of my product or service, and I want to match them up to why might somebody be interested in this. And then what we're doing is we're coming up with that possible value proposition. Again, I say possible because I'm not going to know for sure until I speak with you to see if it truly is, till you tell me it's going to be a value. But I have to lead with something, right? So we want to make sure that that's educated. So what I would do is, let's say I'm going to contact you, and let's say I have a service for authors. So what I do for authors is that I help them make sure that their book continues to sell after their big launch, after their big push, after the publisher quits promoting it, which we know happens all the time, right? So as authors, what do we do to promote it? So I'm going to look at you as an author, and I'm going to say, okay, well, what do authors really want? Well, they probably would enjoy a proven system that helps them to ensure that their book continues to sell, both in the bookstores and also with their online sales. And also, what they would probably like to do is to have a way to capture the email addresses of their buyers, so then they can get them in their own sales funnel. Because if we're selling a mass published book, as you know, all those people may not reach out to you, but it'd be great if we had them in our funnel so that we can, of course, add more value to them. So given all that, I might come up with a possible value proposition for an author, where I might say, we specialize in working with authors who have mass published books, in helping them to ensure that their sales stay high after their initial launch, both in their bookstore sales and their own sales. And we also have an easy way for them to to capture the email addresses and information, so that they can continue to get them in their sales funnel and sell them their other services. Now, again, that was off the top of my head. That was long. We'd want to trim that down. But you'll notice there that we had some results. And as an author, is that something that you might be interested? I'm not selling you this, by the way. I don't have that. You're already doing it, by the way, I'm sure.
But I like what you just did there, and I think this is what you said is like, okay, that was a little bit too long. I need to iterate that, and then you're going to iterate it again and iterate it again until you get exactly the right message.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're cutting out there. I didn't catch on that.
I said what I really liked about what you did there was you iterated. You said you came up with something, and then you said, that's a little bit long. I need to do that again. And you'll practice and practice and practice until you get it and hone it down, so that you can say, the reason I want to meet with you is because we do these things. And what I want the audience to pay attention to is that process, because it's possible and it's not perfect, and you test and you play with it and you work through it until you find the perfect message or the right message that gets you through the door most of the time.
What I do in workshops, and we do it in the book as well. I mean, it's pretty simple. We're looking at basic human motivators. I mean, let's face it, we were all taught that people do things for two main reasons: desire to get something, desire to avoid some type of displeasure or pain. So what I have people do is I say, okay, well, let's take who is your buyer? Okay, what's going on in their world? Let's put ourselves in their shoes, and then let's ask ourselves these questions. As it relates to my type of product or service, or the problem that we're solving, what is it that they really want most? So as an author, I might say, okay, what do authors really want in terms of their book that's going to be in the marketplace? But again, after the initial launch, what do they really want? Well, we want to make sure that it stays relevant. We want to make sure that people are still buying it. We want to make sure that people who buy it have ways to easily contact us, so we can so they can learn more if they want to buy more, or that we can get them into our database. Okay, what do they want to avoid? Well, what they want to avoid is probably having to do a lot of the work themselves. What they want to avoid is having to throw a lot of money at it. And again, we can go through this entire activity. And then what I would also do is, when we do this exercise, is then we say, okay, how can we quantify that? So then we look at social proof. What have I already done for other authors? So I might add to that. Matter of fact, with one author, we helped them to increase their sales after their initial launch, after they implemented our program. Or increase our sales by 10%, whatever the number is, because as you know, when you can attach numbers to it, then we can blow away price objections in advance, and then it becomes more real. And then if I can use the social proof part of it, saying that with one author, I don't even have to name who it was, then that is more persuasive. It has more credibility. It's going to influence more because I've already done it.
I love it. It's all about stepping in their shoes, thinking about their motivators, the emotion, the pain, using influence frameworks like social proof. But if you listen to Art's words, it's all about them, not about you. And that's the key. And that's the process of, like, I love what you said, staying on stage, right? You're getting the next 5 seconds and the next 10 seconds because you're talking about the things that are important to them, the human emotion. In the book, by the way, Smart Calling, you lay out the entire process for building possible value proposition. So buy the book, and the whole system's in there for you as a rep to dial all that in. I want to end today with the number one, like pleading, help me, Jeb, question that I get, and that is from salespeople, the bane of their existence. How do I get through gatekeepers? And you deal with gatekeepers a great deal in Smart Calling. I have a chapter for gatekeepers in Fanatical Prospecting as well. Talk to me about gatekeepers, or talk to our audience about gatekeepers, and your suggestions for dealing with what is truly an emotional issue for salespeople who are working really hard to try to get through to a prospect.
Well, I think the first thing that salespeople need to do is to change their mindset about assistance, okay? And I try to even not use the word gatekeeper, because there's another one of those negative terms in sales, like rejection, cold calling, gatekeepers. Because what do we think of, most people, when we think of gatekeeper? We think of somebody to go around, through, over, under, above, right?
An adversary.
What I always tell salespeople, gatekeepers are much better at getting rid of salespeople than you are at getting through them, because they're doing it all day long. Matter of fact, they go to gatekeeper school so they can get rid of bad salespeople. So and people who naturally have that negative attitude, what are you going to get? You're going to get resistance when you think that that person is the enemy. So I like to call them assistants for two reasons. They're the buyer's assistants, but also very importantly, let's view them as our assistants, because they're the most important person in our life at that very second as it relates to getting through to that decision maker. So if we can now look at them as somebody that can help us, and then we understand, again, it gets back to, let's think about them. And really the other day I was making a call, and I fell into what I tell people not to do, and that is thinking more about yourself and what you want to sell. And then I just caught myself, and it was like, well, wait a minute. You're looking at this entirely wrong. What do they want? Okay, let's think about them. What's going on in their world? That is so simple, but let's face it, we're humans, right? As salespeople, sometimes we think, I got to sell, as opposed to, the Zig Ziglar quote, you're going to get whatever you want by helping enough other people get what they want. And that is just, cliches are cliches for a reason, right? Because they work. So anyway, get back to the assistant here. What's going on in their world? What is their job? So the assistant's job is to protect the decision maker's time. Right? Because they couldn't possibly let everybody in who wants some of that decision maker's time. So really what they're asking themselves every time they talk to a salesperson is, does this person have something that my boss might be interested in? And that's the key. We don't want to give them our entire story, just like we don't want to give somebody our entire story at the beginning of a phone call. We want to give just enough so we pique curiosity to cause them to say, sounds like they might have something of value. Sounds like the boss might want this. So what I suggest is, number one, mindset. Then the other thing is, be prepared when they ask the question, what's this in reference to give a version of your possible value proposition, your interest creating opening. And by the way, we always talk about results, not the product or service itself, because people can resist results. I'm sorry, not resist results. People can resist product or services, and they do. I did an article a couple weeks ago where I said, don't talk about your thing. Okay, people don't want to hear about your thing. They want to hear about your results. So I'm going to hint at my results to the screener. So for example, if he or she says, well, what's this in reference to? Oh, well, the reason for the call is that what we do is we specialize in working with authors who have books that have been out for at least a year, and we help them too. And really the purpose for my call is to ask him a few questions to see if I could provide him with some information. Now, so again, I haven't said I want to sell you something. I said, and now, as a good assistant, that person's probably thinking, well, yeah, that's something that we're facing right now. Now, the other part of this is, which I've been teaching this forever, even before the book, and I suggest a term that was popularized by computer hackers years ago in the early 90s, and that's social engineering. Except we're doing it for reputable purposes, for helpful purposes. And social engineering is simply asking questions of anybody other than a decision maker for the purpose of trying to collect some intelligence that's going to help us be more relevant and help them when we actually do put it into our messaging. So I suggest doing this with anyone other than a decision maker. So you can do it with, I like to talk to users of products or services. I like personally to talk to salespeople, because who better to tell you what they're doing with their training or non-training than the salespeople, and how they're managed, what their sales approach is. but especially with assistance as well. So after the answer to the question I just gave you there, I would say, and by the way, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. My name's Art. You're Pat. Pat, there's probably some information you could help me with. Now, notice this phrase here. This is proven to get you more and better information. It's called a justification statement. And the phrase here is, I want to make sure that what I have is going to be relevant to him. Or I want to make sure that I'm not going to be wasting her time. There's probably some questions you can answer for me. Now, notice the wording there. What's the assistant's job? To protect the decision maker's time. Now, if I say I want to make sure that what I have is going to be relevant, I've just said that you and I have the same objective, right? You and I are both on the same page here. So now they're thinking, oh, and plus this is different than most other salespeople who are just smiling and dialing and throwing up their pitch, or trying to go through that person, or being evasive, or, well, it's a business call, or do you make business decisions? I mean, there is just so much crap out there. I mean, I make fun of some of this stuff, or a lot of this stuff actually. So now what I'm doing is two things. I'm positioning myself as somebody who's different, somebody who cares, and I'm asking you some questions, and just by virtue of answering the questions, what are they thinking? Oh, well, this is somebody that probably has something of interest here. And then by virtue of doing that, I can say, Pat, based on what you said here, I'm pretty certain that he would really benefit from some of the things we have to offer here. My purpose for talking to him is not to give him a pitch, but really to gather a little bit more information. And in my process of asking her questions, or him, I might ask a few that perhaps they can't answer, where now they're thinking, oh, well, geez, that's a little bit above my pay grade. Maybe he needs to talk to the boss about that.
I love it. Fantastic. And I like what you said about calling salespeople. That's one of the things that I do. If I get a gatekeeper that I just can't get through, a lot of times I'll just call the sales department. And I'll do that often as well. If I get switchboards and I can't find anybody, I'll call sales, because salespeople always answer the telephone, and the salespeople know where every bone in the entire organization is buried.
And plus they love to talk.
They love to talk. They do. They do. Well, Art, thank you so much, man. I can't believe I got to spend this much time with you today. This is fantastic. And can you do me a favor and tell our audience where they can find you? Tell them just a little bit about your book, because I want people to buy this book. It's a fantastic book. And then tell us any other things that people can do to get more information about some of the things that you've talked about.
Absolutely. And again, truly my pleasure for being on here. And I learned things. I learned things from you just being on this session here today. So again, thank you for the opportunity. Would love to do it again. As far as where I am online, I've got several sites. My flagship site is Business by Phone, businessbyphone.com. What you might be more interested in, where you can really get a lot of free information, go to my blog, which is simply smartcalling.com. And we have a lot of posts there. I put up my videos. We do a lot of fun videos. I put call recordings up there. I've got some free offers. I've got some ebooks, other books as well. And then if you're interested in buying the book, Smart Calling, I don't sell that one myself. I have the same publisher you do. I buy mine from Amazon, actually. And what I will suggest is that we do have some free training that people can get if you're going to buy the book. Excuse me. So go to this site, which is smart-calling.com, smart-calling.com. And then if you go through the link there to get the book, you can come back to the site, and then you can get our free training webinar that we have for you there as well. And I've got an email newsletter that comes out every week, so you can sign up for that at the Smart Calling site as well.
And your newsletter rocks, by the way, so you definitely want to get the newsletter. And Art, thank you so much for joining me for another Sales Master Series. This is Jeb Blount, CEO of SalesGravy.com. And right behind you can see my brand new book, Sales EQ. So don't forget to go to Amazon, because I'm just like Art. I buy my books from Amazon because they can sell them cheaper than I can buy them from anywhere else. Go pick up at Sales EQ. And Art, thank you again for joining us for the Sales Master Series.